I definitely think we qualify for that. What's up, everybody? Dan here from Headwaters Kayak, and behind me I've got the brand new Melker Rodloga. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm not sure, but it's a Swedish designed kayak, and they're all about sustainability. This thing is made out of flax fiber. They're using bioresins. They're really trying to be the first composite kayak that is 100% sustainable. I'd actually been eyeing it up online for some time, and then when I heard there was demos coming out west, I knew I had to get my hands on one. So this is its first stop, the Sacramento River. We're gonna take it out of Newer Pond here and paddle it upriver and test it out. So we're out here at Newer Pond Open Space, which is along the Sacramento River. It's kind of a cool spot because it actually narrows up into this little side channel. Slow moving currents, deep enough water that I can get a composite sea kayak in here, but also slow enough currents I can paddle it back upstream. So let's talk about the Rodloga. It is a striking boat. It's unlike many other kayaks I've ever seen. It's got a little bit different design. It's more of a plumb bow, carries that chine really far into the bow and stern, but it has a nice rocker profile throughout the whole boat. It's a 16'7" by just shy 22 inches wide, so a little bit narrow, but it doesn't feel narrow when you're in it. When you get in it and it's got these nice hard chine, it feels really stable and forgiving. One of the sharpest things about it is this kind of wood ingrained deck, and it's actually not wood. They're using flax fibers to build this boat. As you look over the deck, you'll notice smart things like a swim toggle. It's a handle, but it also is, if you're in the water, it's gonna be able to rotate and not pinch your knuckles. It also has plenty of room under the deck line, so you can get a hand, even with gloves on, get a nice handle on the boat. It's got a bungee up here for paddle storage, or quick stow if you just need to slide your paddle under there. That's what that little ball's for. It has a nice contour that runs the length of the deck, so you can fit your water bottle or a bilge pump underneath there. Obviously a front storage hatch, Kayak Sport, which is a reputable name brand. You see the flax fibers in the bulkheads as well. It's got a front storage hatch, which is surprisingly decent sized for a front hatch. You have your skag control up here, which is nice because it's forward, it's out of the way, but still easy to reach. It's right by your skirt handle. In the cockpit, you'll notice it has fairly aggressive thigh hooks. I've sat on this boat and I've actually paddled it once before, and that's one of the things I really enjoyed, is the contact to the boat feels great. And it's not obtrusive, but it's also enough where you could add, if you wanted to pad this out and give yourself a little more contact, you definitely could do that. Down below, you have the Smart Track rudder system, which is fairly standard in the industry. Similar to what we're seeing on Stellar kayaks, it's got a nice wide footbed as well as a big toe pedal. And the other thing you'll notice is these are rudder lines, Spectra rudder lines, which is kind of unique because I already said skag, but the Rodloga actually has both. It has a rudder and a skag, which is a very cool thing because most kayaks have one or the other, but more and more folks are enjoying using the rudder, especially for me. Like, I'm doing a lot of photography, videography. I don't mind having that rudder at all back there. And if I didn't want it for something, it's easy enough to take off and unpin. It's not that big of a deal. But now you have the best of both worlds. If I'm going crosswind and I want to just drop the skeg down for a little better tracking or boat handling, I can do that. Or I can drop the rudder down, and that's going to give me an additional point of steerage as well as control in the wind. Behind the cockpit, you have your day hatch, pretty standard. You're going to have a second bulkhead right here. Kind of an interesting deck pattern here, but you could definitely put your paddle float or your paddle underneath here for doing paddle float rescues. It's going to be quite a ways back, but with the day hatch there, this is it's a pretty decent way to do it, and you definitely still can be done. I know some would say don't even put your paddle underneath the bungee. Some folks are frowning on that in rescues because it does make it hard to get the paddle back off. But for folks that are wanting to try that and learn that, you can definitely do it. It also has a decent little groove behind the cockpit. If you're wanting to put your paddle there for doing self-rescues, that's a good spot to do that as well. The seat itself is pretty basic. It's just got a neoprene back band attached to this like hard plastic. Very simple, closed cell foam pad underneath your butt. Low profile, not a lot of bells and whistles, but it's comfortable enough for this style of kayak. If you're one of those people that has back issues or wants more support, there's a lot of back bands out there on the market, and I would definitely suggest upgrading to something a little bit more plush. And then for the seat pan itself, I like a simple fiberglass contoured seat pan because it gives good support and allows you to rotate, but you can always pad out your seat to be exactly how you like it for your style of paddling. Another product I'm getting to test today is the Sea to Summit Big River Dry Bag. They sent me a few different sizes of these, and I've actually been using them all summer long. They've become my go-to dry bag. They're fairly lightweight. They're super rugged. They've got that rubberized bottom. So I'm constantly setting it down on the gravel. And that way I don't ever have to worry about the thing getting beat up. It also has spots where I can carabiner off to if it's in a raft or in my canoe. Got a few spots to lash it down. These are great. I've really been enjoying it. So shout out to Sea to Summit for supporting the channel. Other than that, I think that's about it. I've got the turquoise hull white deck, which I think is so sharp. Let's get this thing on the water and see how it does. It's fun to get you guys out on a little upriver paddle. This is what I do a lot of the time in Redding because we have a lot of lakes, but I don't know, lakes don't offer a whole lot of dynamic paddling. It's not like it's super windy here or big open water. So when I want dynamic paddling or to really test a boat's characteristics, I bring it to the Sacramento River. And what I love about it is it's, you know, it's not hard water, but it's moving at just the right pace so I can still make my way back upstream and put in where I launch. So first thing, when I sit down in this boat, what I notice, for me at 6'2", 220, there's no need for hip pads. My butt is pretty locked in. I think if you had a wider rear end, you're gonna find those hips to be a little snug. The cockpit itself, plenty of length. I'm not scraping my shins. I've got a 34-inch inseam, no problems there. It is definitely one knee at a time. You're not getting both out at the same time. You're getting one out and then the other. But the benefit to that is when I'm in this boat, I'm really tucked in. I feel locked in, I feel connected. My size large spray skirt fits on there great. Still using the level 6 king skirt. That's kind of what I've been using for sea kayaking lately. It feels awesome. And it is a narrow boat. It's less than 22 wide, but it sure doesn't feel that way when you're in it. It feels like a huge secondary. It also feels like as soon as you put that edge in the water, it wants to carve a turn, which is what I would have expected for a boat with this much edge and this much rocker. It should be really playful, even though it's almost 17 foot long. All right, just gonna start our paddle with a little bit of downstream. Just gonna play with Yetis along the way. I also like paddling in rivers because it kind of encourages you to use strokes that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have used. You know, if you're navigating a long kayak downstream, you have to know your draw strokes. It really helps to know how to peel in and eddy out. Just like a little tiny eddy here. We'll just kind of low brace into it, let the boat cross. So when I'm peeling out in a sea kayak, I let the boat cross the eddy line about an 11 o'clock, or in this case like a 1 o'clock angle. Give it a little low brace, and then when I want to start moving downstream, I'll roll the paddle backwards and do a draw. That helps me direct the boat. Whether I'm going into the eddy, same move, low brace, draw towards the bow. That's awesome. Even for a 17-foot boat, this thing handles great. I'm also really impressed by this paddle. It's a fairly small blade, especially for me. I'm used to a little bit bigger surface, but it has a great feel in the water. Yeah, it feels supportive and predictable, which is kind of what I want. I don't want to think about my paddle. I want it to just feel like my hand's in the water. The other thing you'll notice is I always look into my turns. If I'm catching an eddy, I want my head to be looking into the eddy, always looking where I want my boat to go. There's a little standing wave. Let's see if I can get this thing in. Nice. I'm sure it looks like nothing on the camera. Just enough to keep the boat in place. If you can find a wave like this that's just glassy and smooth, just enough to keep the boat from getting pushed backwards, you're basically just riding a little mound of water. It's really good for learning directional control and ruddering. See how my paddle's parallel with the boat? Dropping that paddle into the water, and I can push from that paddle to bring the nose of my boat over. Simple, easy ruddering strokes. And if I want, I can actually open up the power face and do a stern draw. So this is a stern pry, ruddering my boat away, stern draw, rudders my boat towards the blade. keep going. One thing I always look for in my boats is a really low back deck, and this one's kind of medium. It's not super low, but I do like how they drop the coaming in there, so I can still, you know, lay it way back, brace, or do layback rolls if I wanted to. I'm in the high volume as well. It's important to note that there's two different volumes of this boat. There's a lower volume and a higher volume. And the high volume definitely feels full. Like for my size, I fill it out. It feels easy, it feels comfortable. But it still feels like I could have 100 pounds of gear in here and not really phase the performance. So far cruising downstream, there's no need for a rudder or a skeg. This boat's really easy to control just by paddle strokes. I could see it being a little bit unwieldy on a windy day because the stern definitely feels like light and maneuverable, where you might want that additional skeg or rudder to help it go straight. But that's really what it's for. I'd much rather have a boat that was high performance when I needed it and tracked with a skeg or a rudder, as opposed to something that just tracked like an arrow, but I really got to muscle it around to get it to go where I want to go. Especially for the kind of paddling I do, which is close to shore. I enjoy maneuvering. I enjoy playing with strokes. And this boat really lends itself to that style of paddling. If you like playing with strokes, this boat's going to reward that paddling style. It feels playful, like a, I don't know, 15, 16 foot. I love that flat bottom. When I do a draw stroke, you can just see that boat come along. That's cool. So predictable on that secondary. It just feels like it locks right into that edge, just right where my skirt touches the water. It's so solid. And coming from my Stellar boats, which are soft chines, they're a little bit more ball bearings. They're a little bit like I've got to hold it on the edge. It has a secondary. It feels predictable, but this one feels like clunk, and you're there, and it's solid, and it's got, you know, a ton of support. The acceleration feels really good too. Just get a few paddle strokes going, and it takes off. That'll really come into play when we start making our way back upstream. It's been a while since I've been in a 17-foot boat that I was like, yeah, this is cool. So often 17-foot boats just feel cumbersome and awkward. This one definitely feels like it was built to play, built to dance. This one really mixes that speed glide, but when you put it on a strong edge, those ends just come out of the water and really slide across the water. This is kind of cool to have it empty on the water so you guys can see. Look at how much of that boat is out of the water in the back. The stern's out of the water, bow's out of the water, and then when I sink it in the water, it's just at that water line. So there's not a whole lot holding it in place. And that's why when I give it a sweep, it actually maneuvers and performs like a much smaller boat. Look at that. So I'm gonna set my camera up on this tree right here so you guys can get a nice third-person view of what the boat looks like on the water as I'm doing these things. First thing we'll do is give you guys a little side profile so you can see how I'm setting it in the water. There you go, you can see both the ends are in the water. So when the boat's put on edge, it actually lifts the bow and stern out of the water a little bit, reducing the friction, making it feel like a much shorter kayak in the water. I love how it slides across the water, just simple draw strokes. That flat bottom really makes this boat want to maneuver. So the tracking's not bad, although it's not a stiff tracking boat. It's definitely geared towards somebody who wants to play around with those strokes and feel the water with their paddles. That's when this boat comes to life, which is perfect for a guy like me because that's my favorite thing to do. Let's see if we can go hit another spot. So eventually here we'll get into the more speed and touring aspect of this boat, because we're going to start making our way upstream now. It's not far, it's probably only a mile, but we've got 2 to 3 mile an hour currents coming right in our face. So it'll definitely allow us to put this boat to the test. Spots like this is where I might actually start using my rudder a little bit more. When I've got a long upstream section I need to paddle, I used to be just such a stickler. Like, you don't need a rudder, if you can't do it with your paddle strokes, you shouldn't be out here. But I guess the more I do this, the older I get. Now I'm almost 40. I don't mind making it easier on myself. And the Stellars really taught me that the rudder is a tool to be used. It's not necessarily, you don't need to use it every second of every paddle, but it is there to be used. And a lot of times it can make your paddle way easier. So when you do get to the fun spot where you're going to be surfing or you got to charge hard to get up a shelf, you have that energy and muscle you need. You're not fatigued just from getting there. So I know some of you will ask, how does it roll? How does it feel bracing? Things like that. So we'll just run through a couple little things and see how it does. When I'm testing a boat for its secondary stability, I like to find a spot like this that has a nice, shallow, sandy spot. I can low brace and just kind of feel the water. And it's got this spot right about here where the kayak feels locked into a secondary. Anything I do further than this, I'm gonna have to start bracing. Kind of gives you an idea. It's basically, once that water gets right to the spray skirt, that's about its secondary edge. Anything more than that, and you'll have to apply a little bit of pressure. I would say the stability feels significant. I mean, for a 22-inch wide boat, it feels like a much wider, more forgiving boat. Notice I'm doing low braces. Typically in a sea kayak, that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with the low brace. If I'm high bracing, that means the wave's hitting me or I've already gone over too far, and maybe I'm going to set up for a roll. Rarely am I high bracing in a sea kayak. I'm going to go ahead and just take my shirt off and roll this thing for you guys. The hatches are buttoned up. We'll just start with some deep bracing. See how that feels. Yeah. Feels very confident on that secondary edge. And sometime a low brace, if it doesn't work, it's got to go to a high brace. Whew, that is some cold water. Even though it's maybe 95 degrees out here today, this river is always about 45 to 50 degrees, depending on where you're at. So it'll definitely wake you up. As I start doing that bracing and sculling, now's when I notice myself a little bit knocking back and forth. Like I could use probably a little bit of hip pads, at least on the top of my hips. Ooh, that is some cold water. Whew. Oh, I'm getting a brain freeze. Try rolling on both sides for you guys and see how it does. I think it's deep enough here. Ah, that was a very rushed roll. Don't judge me on that one. That was pretty bad. It's been a while since I've been rolling. Well, not my best rolls, but at least they're dry. I had to finish those ones up with low braces. Whatever you do, don't slow that down and judge me there. I really like the skag placement on this boat. Why don't all boats go there? It's away from my knees, it's far enough forward, it's super easy to reach. It's not like back here, I'm trying to figure out what hip it's on. It's right there. It makes a lot of sense. So the boat roll's great. I think it's more of an issue of me being a little out of practice, but it was easy. It was actually really fun to get out and play with rolls. Early on in my paddling, I would roll all the time, and I was always pushing myself in dynamic water. As I've paddled, I've been doing this 30 years. I don't get out and get a sinus infection every time I go out by rolling. Oftentimes I've been paddling very recreational kayaks, so it's nice to get in something that's high performance and kind of lends itself to this style of paddling, and brush up on the old skills and make sure I still got them. So, in another video, someone asked, why is the day hatch always off to one side? And I feel like this little clip shows exactly why. It's easy to reach around. I can actually get into the gear inside my day hatch without getting out of the boat. If it was centered up, it would just be that much more of a twist, making it more difficult. And as you can see, even while I'm sitting in the boat, I'm able to reach back there, access my dry gear, get my hat, get my sunglasses without feeling tippy at all. So the upriver part was a breeze, actually. This boat is surprisingly fast for how maneuverable it is. I did find when I was pulling out of an eddy that if I got off track, like if I was more than 11 or 1 o'clock to the current, it would take me a minute to get it sweeped back and get it pointed upstream. But that's kind of typical for a 17-foot boat. I don't really care what it is. But really, that's not what this boat was intended for. This boat is a long, fast touring kayak designed for rough water, following seas, performance paddling. And so what I did today was just sort of outside of its scope of intended use, but something that I use a sea kayak for all the time. So my final thoughts on the Rodloga, to be honest with you, I can't give them to you yet. I'm going to spend more time in this boat. I got to get this boat out to the coast. I want to get it in more dynamic conditions and some surf conditions, some following sea conditions. And then I will give you guys an in-depth review of all my thoughts. But today I just wanted to take it out on my local waters where I would paddle any other sea kayak any given day, kind of compare it to what I'm used to. Compared to my Stellar I've been paddling, it's not quite as fast, but I would say it's more nimble and easier to kind of handle. It was very forgiving, very solid on an edge, just kind of did what you told it to do. It was balanced. It just performed beautifully. It was a beautiful kayak to be in. If you're the kind of person that likes to link strokes, that likes edge turns, that likes the feel of like driving and edging a kayak, this kayak is going to reward that style of paddler. Next time you see me in this, I hope to be out on the ocean. I hope to get in some waves, some chops, some following seas, and give you guys a full review. Until then, this is Dan wishing you happy paddling. We'll see you on the next one.